welcome to episode 111 of How About Them Huskies 111. That's a pretty lucky number. Maybe this will be a lucky episode. As always, I'm your host, Connor, joined by Matt and Andrew, and this will probably be a shorter one. We're just previewing the killer matchup against Creighton on Saturday. The Huskies hosting the Blue Jays. We usually split with them. Usually we win at our place, they win at theirs. We've never won out in Omaha, but luckily this one's in Storrs. Huskies won that very important game against Georgetown after dropping against Villanova last week. So they're coming in kind of riding high. Creighton as well. They beat Butler and they beat who did they beat last night? Providence. They handed it to Providence. So they're on a little streak as well. Before we really dive into the matchups and the players, how's your guys' minds going into this one? I feel like we should, even without Liam McNeely, most likely be able to take this, but you never know.
We've talked about it a lot. Not this game specifically, but just both Creighton games in general, how this isn't a team that is like past Creighton teams. They don't have that dominant star power. But when you have a coach like Greg McDermott and you have talent like Kalkbrenner and they unfortunately lost Pop Isaacs and they still have Ashworth. I mean, they're a force within the Big East. You mentioned those two previous wins, lost to Marquette, but then they beat St. John's and Nova. Two very quality wins. That St. John's win, I'm pretty sure, is only one of three losses for them. So they're definitely a very talented team. You're not going to want to take them lightly, even at home in Gamble Pavilion.
Yeah, there's one thing about this game that I really like, and it's the way that we've defended the big men so far this season. We handled Oswin Arunse pretty well for Providence, and then Eric Dixon was just like I said in that episode. He's his own player. He's not your traditional big, so I'm not really going to focus on that because as a big, your job isn't to defend the 3-point line. But we did pretty well against Sorber too, and I'm ready to see Sampson go against Kalkbrenner, who is, I think, 2 or 3 inches taller than him. He's definitely a 7 footer at least. He might be 7'1" or 7'2" on the roster. But I'm really excited to see Sampson defend against him because I think that if he defends well against him without getting in foul trouble, and this game will be over in the first half.
Yeah, I feel like that's the biggest key in this one is to have a guy like Sampson, even Terrace. They have to stay out of foul trouble because Kalkbrenner's a guy who plays north of 35 minutes every night. It feels like he's going to be out there. You can't have silly fouls. If I'm fine if you foul as a big man like that, but don't foul like on illegal screens or moving picks or 50 feet from the basket on a little bump. Don't do stuff like that. If you foul when he's going up for a layup and gets free throws out of it, it is what it is. You were trying to play defense. But we've had too many occasions where Sampson and Terrace, he's not prone. He's not immune from that either. He does it as well, where they just commit these silly fouls that kill momentum. And I feel like if you avoid that, I feel like you're in a good place.
Dan Hurley has read this book before. He's had to deal with Ryan Kalkbrenner now for 5 years. This is his fifth year facing him. So, I mean, if anybody knows how to do it, it's definitely Hurley. We've seen smaller big men a la Adama Sanogo be able to take over a game that features Ryan Kalkbrenner. I'm not too nervous about Kalkbrenner. I feel like the guy that we kind of have to worry about is one we'll be talking about here in a minute, who had a pretty nice game the other night, but we um we definitely know what we're doing. It's just a matter of executing that game plan, like Andrew mentioned. We need to be able to come out and kind of, make Kalkbrenner not the focal point. Let Ashworth beat us.
Yeah, it was looking like that Creighton was going to have one of the best big threes, not only in the Big East, but the whole country. I mean, Kalkbrenner and Ashford, like you mentioned, Matt Pop Isaacs went down for the year with an injury, but that was right after he dropped 27 on number one at the time, Kansas, in a win for Creighton. So they have a win over a number one team under their belt. Sure, they also have, what, 5, 6 losses, so they're not invincible, but I feel like you can't just overlook a team like that. But we'll go to Ashford now. I remember last year, I think it was the game at in Omaha, he hit some ridiculously deep threes that he had no business even taking. He's the type of guy that can do that. The game you mentioned, it was against Butler over the weekend. I want to say he had like 22, 12, and 9 or something like that, nearly a triple double. And he's a small point guard. So to get those 12 boards and 9 assists, we expect he's averaging 6.6 a game. But I feel like outside of Kalkbrenner, he's really the only guy you have to worry about really going off on you because the only other player averaging double figures that's going to play in this game is Jemiah Neal. He's only averaging 10.9. After that, it's a bunch of, I don't want to say below average role players, but no one really stands out. I mean, they have a solid freshman in Jackson McAndrew who's been starting at the 4 for them. But after that, guys like Isaac Trout, who he hit 4 threes at least. I forgot what he ended with last night. against Providence. They have him, Mason Miller, who, if you guys remember, started for them last year. He's been terrible. He was shooting like 13% from the field going into last night. So their depth isn't great, but I feel like Creighton's depth has never been like crazy. They always play their guys a lot, going back to like when they had Nembhard and Trey Alexander. They don't really go too deep into their bench. So I feel like we can take advantage of that. I know obviously we're down a man as well, but with nearly down, Ahmad Noel can maybe see an increase in more of an increase of minutes like he did in that Georgetown game. Maybe he can get a spark there. Jaden Ross as well off the bench. Mahaney played well his past couple. So I feel like our depth can really maybe carry us in this one.
You mentioned that depth. They're really only running 7 guys at the moment, unless you count Ty Davis, whose minutes have been steadily decreasing. They don't really have that bench that we have when we're on, obviously. We could have games like the Nova game where we come out and we are just dead on the bench. But um, I feel like a theme for a lot of these games is we need the bench to show up. And if the bench can show up and we can get production out of Ross and Mahaney, then I mean sky's the limit right now.
Yeah, this Creighton team is completely different than how we've seen it in the past years. We've dealt with guys like Kaluma, even back to Marcus Zagorowski back in the early New Age Big East days, and then obviously Baylor Shireman. So this isn't the same team that we've seen the past couple of years, but obviously Greg McDermott, one of the best coaches, has a great player. You can say whatever you want about his age. He knows how to play his position. He's very good at it. So Kalkbrenner is going to be a challenge for sure. But I think that to me, this game screams defensive masterclass. Like if you need to be on your toes on defense, it's this one. I think they will, honestly.
Yeah, overall, I feel like Creighton's a team that, in the blink of an eye, especially over the past few years, they can put up 90 points on you before you even know what happened. So defense is especially going to be important. I feel like I like the matchups we have on like their main guys. Look at Hassan Diarra; they'll be guarding Stephen Ashworth, Samson Johnson, and Terrace Reed, even though they're prone to foul trouble. They're still a solid big man duo to contain Ryan Kalkbrenner. And the rest of the guys, like I said, there's not much there. Jemiah Neal, I mean, I feel like maybe we'll throw like Solo or Jalen Stewart on him. I don't think he'll be too much of a factor, and the other guys are the other guys. But a guy who's interesting to me, and a guy who hasn't really done much yet for them this season, which is why he'll obviously do something in this game because that always happens to UConn. I'm gonna try to pronounce it right. Fedor Zujic. I'm not sure how you pronounce his name. He was a recruit or commit for this year. He didn't get a waiver. He's from overseas. He didn't get a waiver until the start of Big East play. And he's a guy who they expected to be a starter from day one as a freshman. But he got the late start. He hasn't really blossomed yet. I feel like he's a guy who's going to come in this game and play like 10 or 12 minutes, which would be the most he's played, and knock down a few threes. I feel like that always happens to us. I wanted to look back at something. It'd be a long project to see how many players had their career highs against UConn. So I feel like every game you see that graphic, career high for this guy, career high for that guy. I feel like this would be a game for a guy like Fedor Zugic. I don't even know. I haven't seen him play, honestly. I don't know how to pronounce it, but yeah, we'll just move on to our maybe we'll do matchups to watch for this one. I feel like there's a couple clear ones. I feel like you guys will take the clear ones, but I want to see what you guys have to say about them. What's you guys' matchups to watch for this one?
I feel like the Samson one and Kalkbrenner there's pretty obvious, so I'm gonna go with the other obvious one, which is Haas against Stephen Ashworth. I want Haas on him the whole night. I want him chasing around for all 40 minutes. Yeah, you can't allow a guy like that to get hot, or else the game could end in an instant. So in my opinion, Haas is probably the most important player in this matchup. Obviously, Kalkbrenner can go for 40, but you can't let that second guy, you can't let Ashworth get the best of you. So I feel like with the pests like Haas chasing him around all night, definitely give him some problems and definitely help us pick up a W.
I'm actually going to go the other. I'm not going to go with the obvious one either, Connor. You can have the obvious one, but I'm going to go Neal and Ball because we've said about Solo Ball's defense a lot this year. I mean, it's the reason we gave him a C minus grade was because of his defense. His offense is so good, his 3-point shooting. But this is going to be a huge test for his defense to, see if he can handle guarding the big guys. It's not like Neal is just their starter that they stick in there. He's a very good player. I think he played 30 something minutes against Providence in that annihilation there in Omaha. But I think that matchup is going to be the most important outside of the center one because, like we said about Solo Ball's defense, and honestly, Connor, you said that Fedor Zugic could be the guy to go off against. I think if he's not careful, then Neal's going to really go off.
And I was mentally preparing in those 40 seconds to not do that matchup. So I'm not going to do it. Obviously, we all know Kalkbrenner versus the Bigs. I'm looking at Alex Caravan against whoever ends up guarding him the most at the four, whether it's McAndrew or Mason Miller or Trout. Because I feel like Caravan is just so much better than all of those guys. He almost has to take advantage of it. You can't like play passively. I feel like none of those three, all of them are like known for their offensive game in a way, even though some of them, like Mason Miller, have not been great offensively this year. I feel like Caravan has to take advantage. Maybe I don't like using the word expose. We almost have to expose them on the defensive end. This should be a game where Alex Caravan is able to get 20 points in a variety of ways from beyond the arc, but especially driving the hoop. I feel like maybe going, I mean, they wouldn't go without a center against Kalkbrenner, or maybe dragging the center out and letting Caravan have a clear lane to the hoop where Kalkbrenner's not in there to alter the shot. I feel like could really be to his benefit. But yeah, I feel like this is a prime Alex Caravan 20 points. I'll say like 5 or 6 rebounds, a couple assists as well. Just a usual Alex Caravan performance. And with that, we're gonna move over to players to watch for the Huskies. Who you guys got?
I'm gonna go with Aiden Mahaney. I want to see him come off the bench, and I want to see him have another productive outing like he had last time, our last game. Even though he only had 6 or 7 points, they were six very efficient points. He was able to get out there and make a difference within the game. You can kind of see that confidence starting to grow. Hurley's changed his role a little bit to more of an off-ball kind of player, and you can see it's definitely working. That Nova game, I feel like, is going to be an outlier. Um, as the season progresses, and I feel like Mahaney is going to kind of start to develop this new bench role that he's kind of fit into.
Well, since you took mine and didn't double down, I will double down and take solo ball because, like I already said, this game is going to be really important for him on offense and defense. It'll be the first time where we really need his offense and we really need his defense. We just need him to be the complete player that we all know he is. So I'm going to take him for a really good game.
And for mine, I'm gonna play a little game. I'm gonna list off some numbers. We got 10, 2, 0, 0, 4, 14, and 0. If you're not familiar with Jalen Stewart's recent points, those would be his recent 7, 8 games since the Gonzaga game. He had 14 and looked awesome against Villanova. He went scoreless against Georgetown. I mean, I've said this every episode. We need more consistency from guys like that. Even like Mahaney went off against Providence and he didn't do much in the Nova game. He stepped it up a bit. I think he had 6 in the Georgetown game, but we need production out of those guys that aren't like, you don't need them to get 16 every game. But I feel like a guy like Jalen Stewart inserted into the starting lineup in Liam McNeely's absence, I don't think we're asking much from him to get at least 6 to 8 points. I feel like that's almost what you're expecting him to do. So I feel like he's due to step it up again. I'm not saying he'll get 14 or 16 like he's gotten, but I feel like double figures isn't out of the question for Jalen Stewart. I think, do you guys got anything else on this Creighton game? It's going to be a real good one. We'll be recapping it next week, but I do want to touch on a couple things before we end here. Big offer for the Huskies. I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Abdou Toure, I'm not sure how to pronounce that yet. Hopefully, I'll learn very well how to pronounce that when he's a Husky in a couple of years. But he's a 2026 wing. He's a 4-star, but everyone's saying he should and will eventually be a 5-star. Right in our backyard, West Haven, Notre Dame. I feel like this is a guy that UConn usually doesn't miss on these in-state guys too often. But what's your guys' thoughts on this offer and just Toure as a whole?
Yeah, Abdou is fantastic. He's 44th on ESPN, 31st on 24/7, and I feel like he's going to a great or coming from a great place in terms of guards. There's a little bit of a track record. Tremont Waters being the most recent of those point guards to come out. They have a great program at Notre Dame West Haven. They bring out a lot of athletes, and everybody was kind of bugging out about how we haven't offered him yet, but we just did, and you need to look at the fact that we have hardly offered anybody yet. So being able to, take your time on a player like Abdou, who I think is going to be a fantastic player, it's definitely going towards we're going to get him and he's going to come in and be fantastic.
Yeah, I don't want to jump the gun yet, but I feel like that he's going to come here because obviously he's really excited about that offer. But, we don't just offer anybody. You have to earn that. And there's obviously a lot of people who want to play there. There's some people who don't want to play here. We respect everybody's opinion, but I feel like he was kind of waiting and showing himself that he could get that offer. And now that I think he's gotten it, I think he is definitely going to come here.
Yeah, I saw that tweet that I shared on my Instagram from a guy who I know he's a reporter. He doesn't have a verified thing or anything, but I know who he is. He said that all these top SEC powerhouse schools were hesitant to offer him because they figure he just go to UConn. That's like music to my ears to hear that about a top guy. I feel like he's like you said, Matt, he's what 31 on one side, 44 on another. I feel like he's still a junior. I feel like with a massive season like he's been having, he could jump into like the top 20. I feel like this is a guy who might commit earlier than we expect. I mean, I'm surprised it took us this long to offer him. We've known about him for a few years, but yeah, I feel like I like you said, Andrew, don't want to jump the gun here. But I feel like you can't help but get excited about a guy like that when you offer him.
And I was wrong about him being a point guard. He's more of a forward. He's 6'6", so definitely more of a small forward, but you never know with Hurley. Could slide into that point guard role. But yeah, I mean, it definitely shows you what kind of things have changed within UConn as we would offer people from Connecticut a few years ago, and they wouldn't even look twice at us. I can't remember his name right now, but ended up going to Georgetown, transferred out. What was his name? Does anybody know?
Akinjo? You going
Nah,
that far back?
nah, a few years ago. I can't remember where he's from, but um, just getting an offer now from UConn as someone from Connecticut means more than I feel like it ever has in a way. Being able to, feel that pride and knowing that Coach Hurley and the back-to-back national champs want you as kind of their main target is super impressive, and it definitely is more of an honor, like I mentioned now, than it has been in the past. So that's definitely a fantastic thing to see for Connecticut kids going forward.
Yeah, and also while we're on the recruiting hotline here, McDonald's All-America game nominees were announced. Darius Adams from Indiana is there. Braylon Mullins from Indiana is there. I'm currently looking. I assume our good friend Eric Ryba is there. I'm just confirming that. Where is Bullis? That's in Maryland, right? Yep, he's there. So all three of our guys, Furphy, I don't think is eligible because obviously he's in Australia, but good to see them. I hope at least a couple of them make that game. I feel like the way they've been playing, I've seen Braylon Mullins been going off. Ryba, I know he's been to a bunch of UConn games. He was at a couple at home, that Providence game. He was at the Georgetown game because that's very close to his school. And Adams, I mean, I haven't seen too much about him, but he's the highest rated guy amongst those three or four. So you have to really be excited for him. I feel like we're in a really great spot in recruiting right now, and I mean, obviously, you got to focus on the present. This is a team that's competing for a third straight national title, but it's hard to not think about what's coming up over the next 2 or 3 years. All right, you guys got anything else here? Episode 111,
The player I was thinking of was Primo Spears.
Primo. Yeah, I wasn't thinking him, but yeah, that's him. But yeah, so that'll do it here, episode 111. How about them Huskies? Next time hear from us, certainly after that Creighton game, we'll be previewing in that one as well. I think we have Butler next, I'm pretty sure, after Creighton, so we'll be previewing that one. Hopefully Butler wins a game this weekend if they're even playing, so we don't have to talk about 0-7 or 0-6 Butler. But yeah, that'll be next. Thank you guys for tuning into this one. Stay tuned.